Nell Hartwell was 21 the night she learned that the worst pain in the world isn't being struck. It's being seen, and then thrown away. Gray Hollow Pack had a saying whispered to every pup before they could walk. Every wolf finds the one the moon made for them. Her mother used to say it too on the good nights when the fever hadn't yet stolen her voice. She'd hold Nell's small hand in her thin one and whisper it like a prayer. The bond is sacred, unbreakable, eternal. Her mother had been wrong about a great many things. Nell would learn that soon enough. But on the evening of the autumn equinox, standing at the edge of the bonfire, with her plain brown hair pinned back and her plain brown dress smelling of old paper, Nell still believed. She believed the way you believe in something you've never once seen tested. She was 21, and she was about to find out. The bond hit her like lightning. That's the only way to describe it. One moment she was standing near the woodpile, half hidden, the way she always stood, small, quiet, forgettable. The way she'd trained herself to be in a pack where the size of your wolf decided the size of your life. And her wolf was small, dusty brown, unremarkable in every way that mattered here. Then the world caught fire under her skin. Her breath left her. Her heart slammed, and something ancient and certain rose up in her chest and howled this one, this one, this one, pulling her gaze across the flames like a hand at the back of her neck. She found him. Garrett Cole, Beta of Gray Hollow, third in command, broad through the shoulders, sharp through the jaw, with pale gray eyes that caught the firelight and held it. He was laughing at something one of his warriors had said, his head tipped back, utterly at ease, in a body that had never once had to make itself small. Their eyes met, and Nell watched it happen to him too. Watched the recognition strike him, like it had struck her, the widening of his eyes, the sudden stillness, the way his laughter died in his throat. For one heartbeat, one single perfect heartbeat, the moon held them both in her hand. Then she watched his face change. She would remember that change for the rest of her life. Surprise. Then something colder. Then something that made her stomach drop straight through the frozen ground beneath her feet. Disgust. He looked away, deliberately. He turned his shoulder to her, said something to the warrior beside him, and laughed again. Louder this time, forced a laugh built to prove that nothing at all had happened. That the plain library wolf across the fire was nobody, was nothing, was not, could not possibly be his. Nell stood very still while her whole world came apart in silence, because no one else had seen it. That was the cruelest part. The pack went on dancing. The fire went on burning. And she stood there alone, the bond singing in her blood like a struck bell, pulling her toward a man who would not even look at her twice. She did not go to him. She wanted to. God, how her wolf wanted to. But she made herself stay rooted to that spot, because to cross the fire and be turned away in front of everyone, that she could not survive. So she waited. That was her mistake. Waiting. Hoping. She told herself he was shocked. She told herself he needed time. She told herself 100 gentle lies through 3 long nights, lying awake in her small apartment above the library, while the bond ached in her chest like a second heartbeat she hadn't asked for. He gave her his answer on the 4th day. Not privately. That would have required a kindness Garrett Cole did not possess. He called her to the training grounds at midday when the field was full. Warriors sparring pups watching half the pack gathered in the thin autumn sun. He called her by her full name so that heads would turn. Eleanor Hartwell. They turned. Of course they turned. She stepped onto the field with her arms wrapped around herself, and she looked at him, and for one foolish second, she still hoped. "I, Garrett Cole." His voice carried. He wanted it to carry. "Beta of Grey Hollow Pack, reject you as my mate." The bond tore. There's no gentle word for what it does. It was claws inside her chest, dragging. She gasped, stumbled, pressed her hand flat over her heart, as if she could hold the pieces together with her palm. "Accept it." He said it flat, bored almost. "Don't make this more pathetic than it already is." Behind him, someone snickered. Someone whispered the word breeding. Someone whispered the word appropriate. And Nell, because the law required it, because refusing only prolonged the tearing, because she had no strength left to fight. Nell lifted her chin the barest inch and said the words that finished her. "I, Eleanor Hartwell, accept your rejection." The bond didn't tear then. It severed. Clean. A blade through the last thread. She dropped to her knees in the churned mud of the training ground, and she wept, and Garrett Cole turned and walked away without looking back once. That was 6 months ago. 6 months. You'd think a wound like that would close. It doesn't. It just learns to walk around inside you. 6 months of whispers trailing her through the pack house like smoke. 6 months of pitying glances and cruel little jokes left where she'd find them. 6 months of watching Garrett Cole parade through Grey Hollow with Vanessa Thorne on his arm, the Alpha's daughter, tall and silver-furred and glowing. Everything Nell was not, while the whole pack nodded along and said, of course. Of course he chose her. Look at them. That's what a beta's match should look like. So Nell did the only thing she knew how to do. She disappeared into her work. She buried herself in the pack's archives, the great old library, carved into the hillside, 3 floors of forgotten histories that nobody read but her. 16-hour days among the stacks, breathing dust and vellum, learning to survive the phantom ache where the bond had been. She learned the timing of the halls, so she never crossed his path. She learned to be small again, smaller than before, a ghost that catalogued the dead. She thought she'd found a way to live like that. She really did. And then, the invitation came. It came on a gray afternoon, hand-delivered, which should have been her first warning. A young Omega named Perry stood at her door with a heavy cream envelope in his hands, and an expression like he'd rather be anywhere else on the earth. "He said I had to give it to you myself," Perry mumbled. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, Nell." She knew before she opened it. Her hands knew. They shook the whole time. "You are cordially invited to witness the mating ceremony of Beta Garrett Cole and Vanessa Thorne." The words blurred. The cardstock trembled in her grip, expensive and cold. "He's making me deliver them to the whole pack," Perry said very quietly to the floor. "Every single member," he said. The boy swallowed. He said no one should miss it. Every member, including his rejected mate. Nell thanked him. She didn't know how. Something in her ran on autopilot, some small, dignified machine that kept her voice level and her spine straight until the door was shut. Then her legs gave out, and she slid down the back of it, the invitation clutched to her chest, and she finally let herself break the way she hadn't let herself break in 6 months. Because this was not rejection anymore. Rejection she understood. Rejection she had survived. This was calculated. This was a man reaching back into a wound he'd made half a year ago just to press his thumb into it in front of everyone she'd ever known. He was going to bind himself to another woman in 2 weeks, and he wanted Nell there. He wanted her standing in the crowd. He wanted her to watch him give someone else the bond that should have been hers, so that her humiliation would be complete and public and undeniable. I wanted to remind the whole pack of exactly how worthless she was. She cried until she had nothing left. And then she sat in the dark with the invitation, and something new began to form in her chest. Something cold, something hard, something that wasn't grief. Nell did not leave her apartment for 3 days. She called in sick, a thing she'd never done in 5 years of service. Mrs. Aldridge, the head librarian, sounded worried on the phone but didn't push, and the careful silence in that not pushing told Nell everything. The whole pack knew. The whole pack had gotten their invitations too. On the 4th day, Wren Ashby kicked her door in. Literally. The frame cracked. "That's it," Wren announced, striding through the wreckage with a bag of takeout in one hand and a bottle of red wine in the other. Intervention. Right now. Wren was everything Nell was not. Loud, fierce, rust red in her wolf and twice as fast as anyone in the pack. She'd been Nell's friend since they were pups, and she was one of the only wolves in all of Grey Hollow who'd been genuinely incandescently furious about the rejection. She'd stopped speaking to Garrett Cole entirely. Wouldn't say his name. Called him the coward, and only that. "I'm fine," Nell said. "You're a terrible liar." Wren set the food down and crouched in front of the couch, where Nell sat curled in 3-day-old clothes. She took Nell's face in both hands. "Look at me." Nell looked. Wren's amber eyes were burning. "This isn't rejection anymore. This is warfare. He's trying to break you into pieces." "It's working." Nell's voice cracked straight down the middle. "I can't go, Wren. I can't stand in that crowd and watch him. I can't." "Then don't go." "Then everyone knows he broke me. That I couldn't even show my face." "Who cares what they think?" "I do." And there it was, out loud, ugly and true. "I care that I'm the pack joke. I care that my own destined mate looked at me and decided I wasn't worth keeping. What does that make me? What is so wrong with me that the moon herself made a mistake?" Wren grabbed her hands and held them so hard it hurt. "Nothing," she said. "There is nothing wrong with you. Garrett Cole threw away his true mate for a title and a pretty face and a seat at the Alpha's table. That's his rot, not yours. Then why does it feel like mine?" Wren's face softened. She pulled Nell into her arms and held on. "Because that's what rejection does," she said into Nell's hair. "It rewires you to think you're less. But you're not. You're the smartest wolf in this whole pack, and the only one worth a damn, and I need you to start believing me before I lose my mind." They ate cold takeout on the floor. They drank the wine. And for an hour or two, Nell felt almost like a person again. But after Wren left, she picked up the invitation one more time. "You are cordially invited." And that cold, hard thing in her chest turned over. Because she was tired. Not sad tired. Tired of being small. Tired of timing the hallways. Tired of being the ghost who catalogued the dead while the living whispered about her. Garrett wanted her broken. Wanted her too ashamed to show her face. Wanted proof, live and public, that rejecting her had been the right call. What if she didn't give him that? What if she walked in with her head high? What if she walked in beautiful and untouched and let him choke on it? It was a stupid idea. A wine-brave idea, born of wounded pride and nothing sensible. But God, the thought of his face if she walked in radiant instead of ruined. Nell stood up. She swayed. She walked to the mirror and looked at what 6 months had made of her. Red-eyed, pale, hair gone lank and dull, the plain library wolf who'd been so very easy to throw away. What if I wasn't plain? She whispered to her reflection. And the thing in her chest whispered back then, let's find out. The Pack's dress shop was run by a woman named Colette Dubois, who had mated into Grey Hollow years ago from somewhere far more elegant, and had never quite lost the look of someone permanently unimpressed by everything around her. She was one of the only wolves who had never once given Nell a pitying glance. Just brisk courtesy, and underneath it, the sense of someone who had seen every kind of pack cruelty and refused to be moved by any of it. The shop was empty when Nell walked in. Colette emerged from the back with a garment bag over one arm and stopped short at the sight of her. Mademoiselle Hartwell. One perfect eyebrow rose. This is unexpected. I need help. Nell said it before she could lose her nerve. I need to look beautiful. Just once. I don't have much money, but the ceremony, Colette said. Not a question. She set the garment bag down. She circled Nell, slowly studying her, the way an appraiser studies a stone that might, cleaned up, be worth something after all. You're going to attend? Yes. Nell lifted her chin. I'm going to walk in there, and I'm going to hold my head high, and I'm going to show him he didn't destroy me. Something moved behind Colette's eyes. Approval, maybe. Or memory. Revenge dressing, she murmured. A classic. Though I think we can do better than beautiful. She tapped one finger against her lips. How do you feel about magnificent? I can't afford magnificent. Who said anything about you paying? Colette's smile was small and sharp. Consider it a contribution. I have never liked that beta of yours. Too much arrogance, not nearly enough underneath it. Her voice cooled, and what he did to you was unforgivable. Nell's eyes stung. Why would you help me? For a moment Colette said nothing. Then quietly, because I too was thrown away once. Long ago. In another pack by a male who thought he deserved something finer. She took Nell's hand in both of hers. I know what it is to feel worthless, and I know what it is to make them regret ever thinking it. You have good bones, Cherie. Hidden under all that sadness, we are going to make you into someone who stops the room. And so it began. The 2 weeks that followed passed in a blur that Nell would never quite be able to slow down in her memory. Colette was ruthless. She took one look at Nell's closet, pronounced it all. Tragic, and built her a new one out of pieces that hadn't sold jewel tones that made her skin come alive. Tailored lines that made her stand taller than she was. Confidence is 80% fit, Colette said around a mouthful of pins. The rest is attitude. We'll get there. Ren appeared to handle the attitude with a training regimen that had Nell cursing her name into the floorboards. You don't need to be a warrior, Ren said, holding her in a plank until her arms shook. You need to walk in like you could be one. Posture, presence, power. But the help that changed everything came from a place Nell never expected. She was deep in the restricted archives 1 week before the ceremony, the locked section that held the pack's oldest and most fragile records, the ones only she was trusted to touch when she felt someone watching her from between the stacks. She turned. An old woman stood in the shadows. Ancient stooped, wrapped in a gray cloak with cloudy eyes that were nonetheless somehow the sharpest Nell had ever felt on her skin. Elder Marin, the pack's historian. Older than anyone could say. She rarely left her cottage on the edge of the territory, and Nell had never once spoken to her. Eleanor Hartwell, the old woman said. Her voice was like dry leaves. The rejected mate. Nell flinched. Yes, Elder. You mean to attend the ceremony? Maren tilted her head, studying her with that unsettling stillness. Brave, or foolish, perhaps both. A pause. Tell me, child, do you know why the mate bond exists? Nell blinked. The moon makes it. For compatibility. For pack strength. That is what they tell pups. Maren waved one gnarled hand, dismissing it. The truth is older and stranger. The bond is not only about breeding girl, it is about balance. About binding pairs strong enough to lead, wise enough to protect. And when a wolf rejects their true mate, her cloudy gaze pinned Nell where she stood. They do not merely break a bond. They reject their own destiny, their own becoming. He seems fine, Nell said, and heard the bitterness in her own mouth. Better than fine. Does he? It wasn't a question. Maren's thin lips curved. Or is he about to make the greatest mistake of his life? She stepped closer. Cloak whispering over stone. Tell me, these past 6 months, have you noticed anything unusual? Nell went cold. Because she had. The dreams, for one. Vivid night after night, running through silver forests she'd never seen, past temples of white stone under a moon far too large. She'd blamed the stress. And there was something else, something she'd told no one lately. She could tell when people were lying. Not guess. No. A wrongness on the tongue, like a note struck flat. How did you— Maren reached into her cloak and drew out an old leather journal worn soft at the corners. Your mother worked for me, she said. Did you know that before the fever took her? She was no seamstress, whatever she let this pack believe. She was a scholar, and she was researching something. Bloodlines, old ones. Lines gone dormant for generations, sleeping, waiting for the right catalyst to wake them. My mother made dresses, Nell whispered. Your mother was a great many things, chief among them careful about what she told you. Maren pressed the journal into Nell's hands, cool and heavy. She made me swear to give you this if the day ever came that you needed it. I believe that day has come. Nell opened it with hands that would not stop shaking. The first page was her mother's handwriting. She would have known it anywhere. For Eleanor, when she is ready to know the truth. What truth? Nell looked up, but the old woman was already turning away, melting back into the dark between the shelves. That sometimes, Maren's voice drifted back. Rejection is the moon's way of setting you free for something far greater. Read it, child. And when you walk into that ceremony, a pause waited, remember. You are not there to beg for scraps from a male too blind to know a treasure when it was placed in his hands. You are there to take back what is yours. And then, she was gone. Nell stayed in the archives until the windows grayed with dawn. She read her mother's journal, cover to cover, and by the time the sun came up, her hands were shaking for an entirely different reason, and the ground had shifted beneath her whole life. Her mother had not been a seamstress. She had been a keeper of old and dangerous knowledge histories the modern packs had let rot. And in her reservoir she had traced something that had made her hide it and hide her daughter, and go to her grave with the secret half buried. Nell was descended from an ancient line, the Moon Scribes, wolves who had served the very first packs, not as warriors but as readers of truth and keepers of the old written tongue, a language that carried magic in its very shapes, one that no living wolf could read any more. The Moon Scribes could sense a lie the way others sensed a scent. They could read a wolf like an open book, and the line had thinned over centuries, gone quiet, gone dormant. Most descendants living and dying without ever knowing what slept in their blood, unless something catastrophic cracked it open. unless something like the severing of a mate bond broke the lock. The pain breaks open what was sealed her mother had written. The bond's tearing leaves a void, and older magic rushes in to fill it. My darling girl, if you are reading this, it means you have suffered. I am sorry. But know this. What was meant to destroy you may be the very key to your power. Nell closed the journal. She stood. She walked to the old mirror at the end of the stacks and looked at herself in the gray light. Same brown eyes, same face. But something in the way she held herself was different now. Something in the set of her jaw. She looked like a woman who was keeping a secret. The ceremony was in 3 days. Garrett Cole wanted her there to finish her. She smiled at her reflection slow and sharp, and felt something ancient turn over in her blood. I was going to get so much more than he'd bargained for. The day before the ceremony, Grey Hollow lost its mind. Nell felt it before she understood it, the whole pack house humming with a strange electric tension. Warriors moving too fast in the halls. Omegas scrubbing rooms that were already clean. And underneath it all, on every wolf's skin, that instinctive prickle that means an alpha is near. A big one. A stranger. Wren found her at the bottom of the library stairs, practically vibrating. Have you heard? Heard what? He's coming. Wren's voice dropped to a fierce whisper. Today. Here. The Alpha King. Nell's stomach dropped straight through the floor. The Alpha King. Lucian Voss. Ruler of the entire Western Territory. 30 packs answered to him. He'd taken his crown at 25 and spent the decade since consolidating a fractured continent of wolves into something like order. The stories painted him a dozen ways, ruthless, brilliant ancient, beyond his years, merciless to anyone who crossed him. Why? Nell managed. Why would he come here? Nobody knows. Alpha Reeve is losing his mind. The coward's been screaming at people all morning. Wren's eyes narrowed with something calculating. And here's the part that's got everyone whispering. He didn't give proper notice. Just sent word last night that he'd arrive today. And, she leaned in, he asked for 2 things, rooms for himself and his guard, and access to our archives. The archives. Nell's heart did something complicated, which means, Wren said, grinning now. Guess who might actually have to deal with the most powerful wolf alive? She didn't wait to be asked. She spent the morning in the restricted section cleaning and cataloging with a nervous energy she couldn't burn off, telling herself it was foolish that a king wouldn't come 3 hours out of his way for a minor pack's dusty records, that he was surely here for the wedding, for politics, for an alliance with the Thorns. That made sense. That made far more sense than any of the small, wild hopes flickering in her chest. So she was up on the 5th rung of a ladder, dusting a high shelf of leather journals when she felt it. A presence. Sudden, vast, predatory in a way that had nothing to do with threat, and everything to do with power. Every instinct in her body screamed one word, Alpha, and she turned too fast and her foot slipped. She fell. Strong hands caught her at the waist, steadied her effortless before she'd dropped more than a foot. Nell looked down into a pair of eyes the color of molten silver. The man holding her was tall. She was still on the ladder, and they were nearly eye to eye. Broad-shouldered, dark-haired, dressed in a black that was quiet and expensive and perfect. But it was the eyes that stopped her breath. Silver. Luminous. Old in a way his face was not, and fixed on her with an intensity that pinned her in place like a moth. Careful, he said. His voice was a low rumble. That would be an unfortunate way to meet. She realized she was still in his hands. She scrambled down. He stepped back, giving her room, but he did not look away, not once. The archives are closed for cleaning, she said, grasping for something. Anything that felt like solid ground. If you need something, you'll have to come back. I am exactly where I need to be. He tilted his head, studying her with unnerving focus. You're the archivist. Not a question. Eleanor Hartwell, she said. And you are… His mouth curved a smile that didn't reach those strange silver eyes. Interested in your collection? I'm told Grey Hollow holds records going back to the first councils. Is that so? We have documentation from the founding of the Western Territory. She found her footing on familiar ground, grateful for it. You'd need the Alpha's permission for the restricted materials. Would I? The amusement in his voice suggested he had never in his life needed anyone's permission for anything. And if I told you my particular interest was in bloodline records, dormant lines specifically, families that once carried power and lost it over the generations. Nell's breath caught in her throat. Because that was it. That was exactly what her mother had spent her life chasing. Exactly what Nell had read in that journal 3 nights ago until dawn. That's unusually specific, she managed. I have unusual interests. He moved closer, and she fought the urge to step back. He smelled like winter pine, and something wilder underneath, like a storm coming down off a mountain. Tell me, Miss Hartwell, do you believe in fate, in destinies written long before we're born? I used to believe in mate bonds, she said, and the honesty surprised even her. That turned out to be a mistake. Something flickered in the silver of his eyes. Did it? Or did it simply reveal that what you called your destiny was only ever an obstacle in your way? And then he reached past her, reached to a shelf she'd cleaned that morning, and drew out a single journal with the ease of a man who knew precisely where it would be. Nell's heart stopped. Because it was her mother's journal. The one Elder Marin had given her. She'd brought it in that morning to copy a few pages and left it on the research desk. Except this wasn't the desk. This was a locked shelf, and she had not put it there. How did you… The words dried in her mouth. Because I know what I'm looking for. He opened it, and his eyes moved down the pages with terrible speed. Your mother was thorough. She found that the moon scribe line still had living blood in it. One descendant in particular. His gaze lifted from the page and settled on her, and it held her the way a hand holds a small, trembling bird. You. The floor tilted under Nell's feet. Who are you? She whispered. Someone who pays attention to bloodlines. Someone who notices when old magic begins to wake. He closed the journal, set it down, with a care that was almost reverence. Tell me, how long have the changes been happening? The dreams, the way you can taste a lie now. I don't know what you're talking about. But her voice shook and gave her away. Yes, you do. He stepped closer, and this time she did step back until her spine met the shelves behind her. Your awakening, Eleanor Hartwell. The rejection cracked something open. Something your mother prayed would stay asleep, safer that way, quieter. But the moon has never much cared for safe or quiet. You need to leave, she said, fear sharp in her throat. I don't know who you are, or what you want. What I want, he said softly, is to make you an offer. I'm not interested. You haven't heard it. His smile turned sharp now, predatory. Tomorrow you plan to walk into a ceremony and watch the mate who threw you away bind himself to another woman. You plan to walk in looking beautiful, proving you're not broken. Brave. A pause. And stupid. Nell flinched. That's none of your business. It becomes my business the moment I find a use for you. He drew something from inside his coat, a heavy cream envelope sealed in wax she didn't recognize. "Here is what I offer. Do not walk into that hall tomorrow as Eleanor Hartwell, the rejected Omega, hoping the room won't see her shaking. Walk in as my companion, my guest, and watch what happens when your former mate understands all at once exactly what he discarded." Nell stared at the envelope. "Why, you don't even know me, don't I?" Those silver eyes glittered. "I know you're a moon scribe waking into her power. I know you're clever enough to run these archives at 21. I know you were brave enough to choose public humiliation over hiding in the dark." His voice dropped, and something almost cold entered it. "And I know that what you need is not a fine dress and good posture. What you need is someone at your back who will make every wolf in that room understand that rejecting you was the worst mistake of your beta's small and grasping life." "And you're that someone," Nell breathed. "I am Lucian Voss." He said it the way another man might mention the weather. "And yes, I am exactly that someone." The world tilted the rest of the way. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf on the continent, standing in her dusty archives offering what to escort her to her rejected mate's wedding. "This is insane," she whispered. "What could you possibly gain from—" "Perhaps I dislike males who reject true mates for advancement." His voice went cold and hard as river ice. "Perhaps I think the bond is sacred, and watching wolves treat it like a contract to be torn up disgusts me." Then his expression shifted, colder, more calculating. "Or perhaps I need access to what your mother hid in these shelves, and an alliance with an awakening moon scribe would serve us both." There it was, the real reason, or one of them. "I'm barely awakened," she said. "I don't understand what's happening to me. Which is why you need a teacher. Someone who knows the old ways." He held out the envelope again. "This is a formal invitation to attend the ceremony as my honored guest. Accept it, and I will help you understand what you are becoming. Refuse it." His gaze didn't waver. "And you walk in alone, and every wolf in that room will see exactly what you're trying so hard to hide. That you are frightened and heartbroken, and praying this doesn't finish you." The words cut, because they were true. For all of Colette's beautiful clothes, for all of Wren's drills, Nell was terrified of tomorrow. "What do you really want from me?" she asked very quietly. And for the first time, Lucian Voss smiled a smile that reached his eyes. Something almost warm moved through all that silver cold. "The truth," he said. "I want to see what you become when you stop letting other people decide your worth. I want to watch a moon scribe remember her power. And yes," he leaned in on his voice, dropping to a murmur that raised the hair on her arms, "I very much want to see the look on Garrett Cole's face when you walk into that hall on the arm of a king." Nell's heart was hammering against her ribs. It was reckless. It was dangerous in ways she couldn't begin to measure. She knew nothing about this man, except that he wanted something from her, and would not fully say what. But God help her, the thought of walking in tomorrow, not as the pathetic rejected mate, but as this. "He rejected me," she whispered, "publicly. He spent 6 months making certain everyone knew how worthless I was. Then let us make certain everyone learns how catastrophically wrong he was." He pressed the envelope into her hands. It was heavy, real. "Your choice, Eleanor. Walk in alone and hope your brave face holds, or walk in with me and let me show you what it means to have real power standing behind you." Elder Marin's words came drifting back through the dark of her memory. Sometimes rejection is the moon's way of setting you free for something far greater. Maybe this was that something greater. Or maybe she was about to make a bargain with a wolf far more dangerous than Garrett Cole could ever dream of being. There was only one way to find out. "All right," Nell heard herself say. Her voice did not shake. She noticed that distantly, with a small shock of wonder, it did not shake. "I accept your invitation." Lucian Voss's smile turned victorious and sharp and pleased. "Excellent," he said. "Wear something that makes you feel powerful. You'll be representing more than yourself tomorrow." He turned to go, then paused, glancing back over one shoulder. "Oh, and Eleanor, that beta of yours is going to regret the day he let you go." Those silver eyes gleamed in the low light. "I'll see to it personally." Then he was gone, moving through the stacks without a sound, leaving her alone in the gray dawn light with a heavy sealed envelope in her hands and the whole shape of her life bending in a new direction. She opened it. Her fingers trembled now, but not the way they had at the door with the wedding invitation. This was something else. "The Alpha King requests the honor of your presence as his companion at the mating ceremony of Beta Garrett Cole and Vanessa Thorne." Nell started to laugh, then to cry, then to laugh again, sitting on the cold stone floor of the archives. Her mother had loved an heir to a power she was only beginning to understand. Tomorrow was supposed to be her quiet, private reclaiming of one small scrap of dignity. Instead, she was going to walk into that hall on the arm of the most powerful wolf alive. Garrett Cole thought he was going to break her one final time, in front of everyone she knew. I had no idea what was coming through those doors. The car came for her at 6. Sleek and black and silent, it pulled up outside Colette's shop while 3 women stood in the doorway, watching a 4th become someone else entirely. Because that's what the last 2 weeks had done, and what the last night had finished. Nell stood in front of Colette's full-length mirror and did not recognize the woman looking back. The dress was midnight blue that shifted to deep violet when she moved silver embroidery, tracing the neckline in patterns that looked, if you looked too long, almost like writing. Lucian had sent it that morning with a note in sharp, elegant hand. "Wear this." Her hair fell in dark waves. Her eyes looked enormous. She looked like a woman who belonged somewhere she had never once been allowed to stand. "Those aren't just decorations," Colette had murmured earlier, tracing the silver thread with one careful finger. "These are old marks. Protection. He isn't only claiming you tonight, Cherie. Not only socially." She'd met Nell's eyes in the glass. "Which means you must be certain. Truly certain. Because once you walk in on his arm, you are no longer the rejected mate making a quiet point. You are the Alpha King's chosen companion. Are you ready for what that means?" Nell had thought of Garrett, of 6 months of whispers, of an invitation hand-delivered to be sure she'd suffer. "Yes," she'd said, and she'd meant it. Wren gripped her hand at the door, tears standing in her fierce amber eyes. "You've got this," she whispered. "Go make him regret every single day." Nell squeezed back. Then she straightened her spine and walked to the car. The driver opened the door. She slid into leather, softer than anything she'd ever touched, and there he was, Lucian Voss, in a suit that probably cost more than the whole library. Silver eyes tracking her as she settled beside him. Something like approval moved through his face. "Miss Hartwell," he said, "you look exceptional. Thank you for the dress. It suits you." He leaned forward, studying her with that unnerving focus. "Are you ready? Once we arrive together, there's no undoing it. Every wolf in that hall will see you as mine. My companion. My chosen guest. That carries weight, Eleanor. It carries consequences. Are you prepared to hold them?" Nell met those strange silver eyes, and she thought of the training ground, the mud, the tearing. "I'm prepared," she said. Lucian smiled slow and satisfied. "Then let us go," he said, "and show your former mate the single greatest mistake of his small life." The car pulled away from the curb, carrying her toward the ceremony. Toward Garrett. Toward everything that was about to change. Nell's heart hammered. But her hands were perfectly still. The grand hall of Grey Hollow had been transformed into something out of a dream someone else was having. Thousands of white lights hung from the vaulted ceiling. White roses and silver lilies smothered every surface, their scent so heavy it made her sensitive nose itch. Wolves were already gathering 20 minutes early, dressed in their finest, hungry to witness the beta bind himself to the alpha's daughter. The car eased up to the entrance. "Breathe," Lucian said quietly. "You look like you're walking to an execution." "I feel like I am." He covered her hand with his warm, solid, steady. "Listen to me. In a moment, every wolf out there is going to turn and stare. They'll whisper. Some will be shocked. Some jealous. Some simply confused. Let them. You're not here for their approval. Then what am I here for? Because you're done being invisible." His silver gaze held hers. "Because you deserve to be seen. And because that beta needs to understand that touching you now means answering to me." He squeezed once, then let go. Head high, shoulders back. "You're walking in with a king. Act like you belong there." The door opened. The driver's hand appeared. This was it. No going back. Nell took his hand and stepped out into the light. The effect was instant. Conversations died mid-word. Heads turned. A ripple of pure shock rolled through the gathered crowd, like a physical thing. Gasps, whispers, somebody's glass shattering on the stone. Then Lucian rose from the car behind her, and the whispers became a roar. "Is that's the Alpha King? That can't be Eleanor Hartwell." "She's with him." He offered his arm with old-world courtesy, unbothered by the chaos they'd made, and the crowd parted before them like water before a blade. Nell slipped her hand through his arm and let him guide her toward the doors. They walked through the pack she'd hidden from for half a year, past faces she'd known her whole life, all of them looking at her as though they'd never seen her before. She kept her chin level, her expression serene. Even as her heart tried to climb out of her chest, she caught glimpses. Elder Marin near the entrance, a knowing smile carved into her ancient face. Wren somehow at the front, giving her a covert thumbs up through tears. Colette arms folded, radiating satisfaction. And there, frozen halfway up the entrance steps, Garrett Cole. Vanessa Thorne on his arm, stunning in white silver-blonde hair coiled into elaborate curls. But Nell barely registered her, because she was watching Garrett. He'd gone white. Bone white. His mouth hung open. He was staring at Nell the way a man stares at something impossible, something that violates the order of his whole world. "Nell," he breathed. Just her name. Barely a sound. Vanessa followed his gaze, watched her new mate whisper another woman's name on their wedding day. And her lovely face went from confused to furious in the space of a single heartbeat. Lucian and Nell reached the steps. Garrett and Vanessa stood square in their path. For a moment no one moved. Then Lucian raised one elegant brow. "Beta Cole, are you planning to greet your guests, or should the pack assume the ceremony is cancelled?" The words were polite. The tone was ice going through a lake. Garrett jerked as if struck. Alpha King, we didn't know you were coming. I require no special preparation. Lucian's voice carried easily over the stunned crowd. I'm simply here to witness a mating ceremony, though I confess I find myself curious. This tradition of inviting one's rejected mate to such an event. A pause honed to a razor's edge. Is that common in your pack, Beta Cole? Or is public humiliation a personal hobby of yours? The hall went utterly silent. Vanessa made a small, strangled sound. Garrett looked as though the floor might open and take him mercifully whole. That wasn't. His eyes flicked between them, scrambling. Eleanor is a valued pack member. We invited everyone. How generous. Lucian's tone made it clear he found nothing generous in it. And yet here she is as my guest. Which means, Beta Cole, that you will need to find someone else to torment for your amusement. This one is under my protection now. He let it settle. Do we understand each other? It was not a question. It was a blade wrapped in silk. Garrett swallowed hard. Yes, of course. Eleanor she's welcome here. How magnanimous of you. Lucian's smile was all teeth. To welcome your rejected mate to your wedding. Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe you have a ceremony to prepare for. And Miss Hartwell and I have a great deal to watch. He guided her past them up the steps through the doors into the hall. The moment they were inside, Nell's knees threatened to give. His hand at her elbow held her upright. You're doing beautifully, he murmured. Just a little longer. That was necessary. He glanced down and something almost gentle moved behind the silver. He needed to understand that you are not his to torment anymore, that touching you means answering to me. How do you feel? She thought of Garrett's face, the shock, the confusion, and maybe, the first thin crack of regret. Powerful, she whispered. His smile turned real. Good. Hold on to that. They took the front row. Nell asked for it herself. Alpha Reeve soft around the middle, his dark hair gone gray, staring at Lucian with barely contained panic, offered them seats among the leadership. And when Lucian asked where she'd be most comfortable, the old Nell would have begged for the back. Somewhere invisible. The woman in midnight blue said front row. I'd like to see everything. So they displaced 3 high-ranking wolves and sat dead center facing the platform, and Nell felt 100 stares press against her back, like heat off a fire. The music began. Ancient haunting wolf song, older than the pack itself. Garrett entered first. He should have looked proud. He looked sick. His eyes kept finding her, kept flinching away. He nearly stumbled, taking his place. Then Vanessa came down the aisle, and even Nell had to admit she was breathtaking until she saw where Nell was sitting, and her radiant smile cracked just for an instant into something ugly. Fury. Then it smoothed back into serene joy. But Nell had seen it. The officiant, one of the pack elders, lifted his hands. We gather under the moon's light to witness the joining of 2 souls. The words washed over her. She'd imagined this ceremony 100 times in the weeks after the rejection, imagined sitting in the crowd, breaking apart, weeping through it. She wasn't breaking. She was watching Garrett's hands tremble as he took Vanessa's, watching him steal one more glance at her, his face a wreck of something he had no right to feel. Do you, Garrett Cole, take Vanessa Thorne as your chosen mate? A pause. Too long. Long enough that people shifted in their seats. I do, he finally said, rough, like the words cost him. And do you, Vanessa Thorne, take Garrett Cole? I do. Clear, triumphant, staring at him as if she'd won a prize. "Then by the power of the moon and this pack, I pronounce you bonded mates." It was done. The hall erupted. Nell sat perfectly still, waiting for the pain, waiting for her heart to shatter, and felt nothing. A distant sadness, maybe, for what might have been, but not the ruin she'd braced for, because the bond was already broken. Had been broken for 6 months. This ceremony changed nothing for her, except as Garrett kissed his new mate, a kiss that looked more like a duty than a joy. His eyes opened mid-kiss, found her in the front row, and she watched the recognition finally fully land. Watched him see her, truly see her. Not the plain library wolf he'd thrown away. A woman powerful enough to catch a king's eye, beautiful enough to silence a room, strong enough to sit through his wedding without so much as trembling. Watched him understand all at once that he had traded something rare for something convenient, and that she was going to be fine. Better than fine. The kiss ended. The newly mated pair turned to face their pack, and as they walked back down the aisle, Garrett's steps faltered as he passed her row, his face a wreck of regret and longing, and something that looked, God help him, like grief. Vanessa noticed. Her smile went sharp and brittle as glass. Lucian leaned toward Nell, his voice pitched just loud enough for nearby wolves to catch. "Shall we skip the reception? I think we've seen enough." Nell looked up at him, at this dangerous king who'd handed her the strength to walk in here. "Actually," she said, clear and calm, "I'd like to stay. The reception should be interesting." Lucian's laugh was low and genuine and pleased. "As you wish." The real show, after all, was only beginning. The reception hall was a palace pretending to be a banquet. Crystal chandeliers threw broken rainbows across white-draped tables. A string quartet played in the corner. And when Nell walked in on Lucian's arm, the whole room shifted. Glasses, paused halfway to lips' conversation, stuttered the weight of attention pressing in from every side. But this time, underneath the fear, something new was stirring in her chest. Because she could feel them now. Their curiosity, their envy, their confusion. It was as if the air had learned to carry feeling currents she'd never been able to read before, and now they poured into her from every corner of the room. "You're doing it again," Lucian murmured as they crossed to a table by the windows. "Doing what?" "Reading them! I can see it in your eyes." His silver gaze sharpened with interest. "It's accelerating. Being here under this much strain is pushing your gift forward. Tell me what you sense right now." Nell closed her eyes. And it was overwhelming at first, too much all colliding, but then patterns rose out of the noise. "Fear," she said quietly. "From Alpha Reeve, from the whole leadership table. They're terrified of why you're really here." She concentrated harder. "Rage from Vanessa. She's furious I exist." She opened her eyes. And Garrett. Regret. So much of it. It's eating him alive. "Good," Lucian said simply. "He should regret it. Now, are you still afraid?" She considered it. "No," she said, and was surprised to find it true. "I thought watching him mate someone else would destroy me. Instead, I feel free. Like chains I didn't know I was wearing just fell off. That's the last of the broken bond dissolving. Your own magic is burning away what remained of it." He leaned back, relaxed and watchful. "You aren't his anymore, Eleanor. In any way. How does that feel? Like I can finally breathe." But the peace didn't last, because a woman was crossing the room toward them. Tall, elegant. Silver hair swept into a severe knot, eyes like chips of winter ice. Vanessa's mother. Luna Thorne. She stopped at their table and dipped into a curtsy that was technically respectful and somehow entirely mocking. Alpha King. What an unexpected honor. We'd have prepared a proper welcome had we known, as I've said several times tonight. Lucian replied, pleasant and dismissive, I require nothing. I'm simply here to support Miss Hartwell. Luna Thorne's smile went tight. Yes, that surprised us all. We didn't know you two were acquainted. We met recently. I found her company refreshing. He sipped his champagne. She's quite remarkable. You should be proud to have her in your pack. The implication landed like a slap. But you're not. Eleanor has always been valued in Grey Hollow, Luna said carefully. We were saddened when she and Garrett didn't work out. Didn't work out. Lucian's voice dropped to something arctic. Is that how you describe a public rejection? How interesting. In my territory, we call it what it is. A male discarding his true mate to climb. His eyes glittered. But perhaps your pack keeps different standards. The room around them had gone quiet, wolves straining to hear. And that was when it happened. Because as Nell watched, Luna Thorne's mouth opened to defend herself as her gift reached out. Hungry and new, and brushed against the woman's guarded mind, she felt something she was not meant to feel. A lie. Not a small one. Not a social one. A vis-buried, load-bearing lie, sitting under everything Luna Thorne, was the way a body sits under a floorboard. And attached to it, faint but unmistakable, was a thread of feeling Nell recognized, because she had lived inside it for 6 months. Her own rejection. Luna Thorne knew something about it. Something she had done. Nell's champagne glass trembled in her hand. She set it down before it could give her away. Are you all right? Lucian asked low, only for her. I need air, she managed. Just a moment. She rose, smiled at nothing, and slipped out through the tall doors onto the garden terrace, into the cold, clean night, and pressed both hands flat against the stone balustrade, and breathed. Because it hadn't been random. The rejection, Garrett's cruelty. The training ground humiliation, the timing of it, the public theater of it. Some part of it she didn't know how much had been arranged. By the woman in there, with the winter eyes. Nell didn't hear the terrace door open behind her. You felt it, said a dry voice. Didn't you? Elder Marin stood in the doorway, wrapped in gray, cloudy eyes, sharp as ever. Nell turned. Felt what? Don't. The old woman shuffled closer. You are a moon scribe. You read the Luna's heart just now the way you'd read a page. And you did not like what was written there. She studied Nell's face. Your mother felt it too, at the end. That is why she began to hide you. That is why she died with more questions than answers. What are you saying? Nell's voice had gone thin. That the rejection was planned. Marin was quiet a long moment. When she spoke, each word landed like a stone dropped in still water. I am saying that a moon scribe waking in this pack was a danger to certain people long before you ever felt the bond snap. And I am saying that Garrett Cole is a coward and a climber. But he did not think of that humiliation on his own. Her cloudy gaze held Nell's. He was told to break you, and he did as he was told. The garden tilted. Nell gripped the stone. Why? Because a wolf who can taste a lie is the most dangerous thing in the world to those who live by them. Marin reached out, and with startling gentleness, laid one gnarled hand over Nell's. Your gift child is a mirror, and there are wolves in that hall who cannot afford to be seen. Behind them, the terrace door opened again. Lucian stepped out, and the old woman withdrew her hand, and melted back toward the shadows. "There you are," he said. Then he saw her face. "What happened?" Nell looked at him. At the one wolf here who had chosen to stand at her back, and who she now understood had known more than he'd said from the very first moment in the archives. "You knew," she said quietly. "About my mother. About the danger. You knew before you came." Lucian went very still. "I knew enough to come," he said. "Not all of it. Not this." His jaw tightened. "Tell me what you felt." So she told him. The lie under Luna Thorn. The thread of her own rejection tangled into it. Marin's words on the terrace. And Lucian Voss, the most powerful wolf on the continent, who had walked into her wedding from hell, wearing amusement like a coat, did not look amused anymore. "Then it is worse than I thought," he said softly. "Come. Not here. There are too many ears, and too many of them belong to the wrong people." He offered his arm again, but his voice had changed, the game gone out of it. "You can't stay in this pack, Eleanor. You understand that now. Not merely because they were cruel to you, because they are afraid of you. And frightened wolves do terrible things." She took his arm. She was already, she realized, never going back. The drive to the royal court took 3 hours through Black Forest and winding mountain road, and Nell slept most of it drained past the edge of herself. When she woke, dawn was breaking gold and rose over the ridgeline. And there it was. She'd expected a palace. What she got was something older and stranger. A court built into the living mountain itself, stone and glass grown out of the rock towers, reaching for a paling sky-terraced garden spilling down the slope. Wolves moved everywhere with purpose. Warriors, scholars, a whole city carved into stone. "Welcome home," Lucian said. The days that followed unspooled into something Nell had no name for. A life. A steel-eyed woman named Helena ran the court and gave Nell rooms in the scholars' wing, spacious, warm, a whole wall of windows that caught the morning sun over the eastern gardens. "He asked for that specifically," Helena said, and would not explain further. "He thought you'd want the light for your books." There was Margot Marguerite, the court's finest energy worker, all wild copper curls and amber eyes that glowed a shade too bright. She woke Nell before dawn on the first morning, pronounced her hopelessly behind, and dragged her to a training circle, carved with the same shifting symbols Nell had seen in her dreams. "Emotion is the easiest trigger for raw power," Margot said, circling her. "It's also the messiest. You lit a whole room on fire with anger at that reception. Now I'm going to teach you to light a single candle on purpose. Find your anchor. The reason you need this." Nell closed her eyes, and thought not of revenge, of standing up, of being seen, of the exact moment at the reception when she'd told the truth, and the room had gone still. Heat bloomed under her skin. The candle caught. Thither Margot breathed. First day. He is going to be insufferable about being right. And there was Silas Ward, the head librarian, lean and warm-eyed behind wire-rimmed glasses, who kept the court's most guarded treasures under lock and glass. 17 small leather books written in a tongue no living wolf could read. Just looking at them made Nell's head ache. "They're encoded," Silas explained, "with magic that only unlocks for certain blood. Moonscry blood, chiefly." He drew the smallest one out and set it in her hands. "Lucian wants you to try. See if the training's made a difference." The moment her fingers touched it, the pain sharpened, but beneath it, something else. A pulling, as if the book wanted to speak and could not quite reach her. There's information here, she whispered. A warning. I can feel it. I just can't read it yet. But you can feel its shape. Silas leaned in, eyes bright. That's more than any wolf alive has managed in 200 years. She was getting stronger, every day. And every day she felt more like a person and less like a ghost. Except at night, when she'd lie in the dark and feel the shape of that buried lie again, the one under Lunar thorn, and wonder how far it reached. 3 weeks in Lucian found her in the library after midnight alone with the smallest text. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. He sat across from her. He looked tired in a way she'd never seen the king set down. For a moment, just the man left, and Nell, who could read a room now like a page, read him. Grief, old and deep and carefully kept. You asked me once what I really wanted from you, he said. I gave you half an answer. I noticed. His mouth twitched. You would. Then the humor faded. Here is the other half. I have been searching for an awakening moon scribe for a long time, Eleanor. Not out of curiosity, out of need, and not for the reason you think. He drew a breath. There was another. Before you. A moon scribe. Her name was Lyra. The name came out carefully, like something fragile he'd carried a long way. She woke into her gift the way you are waking now. She could read these texts. She read them for me, and she found in them a warning about a thing our people have forgotten, a thing that comes when wolves stray too far from what we are. A reckoning. What happened to her? Lucian was silent for a moment. The last reckoning happened before my time, but its shadow reached forward. Lyra saw it coming, and she tried to warn the packs, and they didn't listen. And when it began to touch the outlying territories, my court could not protect her. His hands were very still on the table. She died, Eleanor, doing the work I asked of her, reading the truth for wolves who'd rather have stayed blind. I swore I would never let that happen to another scribe again. And there it was, the reason he'd stood at her back, the reason for the rooms with the morning light, and the protection marks stitched into a midnight blue dress. But there, it was too cold and small in her chest, the other truth underneath it. So I'm her, Nell said quietly. A second chance, a do-over. You looked at me in that archive and you saw Lyra and you saw a way to make it right. No. Lucian said it sharply. Then softer. No. Not at first, perhaps. At first you were what I needed. I won't lie to you, I never will. But you are not Lyra. You are nothing like Lyra. She was gentle. You are not gentle. Something almost like a smile. You are the most stubborn, unbending creature I have ever met, and you walked into your own execution in a blue dress and made a room full of wolves forget how to breathe. I did not save you, Eleanor. You did. I merely opened a door. Nell's throat ached. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it frightened her because she had believed a wolf. Once before believed the moon herself had chosen her, and she'd knelt in the mud for it. I need to think, she said. Of course. He rose. At the door he paused. The warning Lyra found. The reckoning. He didn't turn around. I have reason to believe it is beginning again. The signs are already starting. Mate bonds dissolving without rejection. Shifts failing. And the texts you're learning to read may be the only thing that tells us how to survive it. A pause. I did not bring you here only to spare you a cruel wedding, Eleanor. I brought you here because I think you may be one of the few wolves alive who can help me save a great many lives. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. Then he was gone, and Nell sat alone with the smallest text glowing faintly under her fingertips, and understood that her old life, the small one, the safe one, the invisible one, was gone for good. Because she wasn't only a rejected mate anymore. She wasn't only a woman playing dress-up to spite a coward. She was a moon scribe, and the world, it seemed, was going to need her. The first reports came 4 days later. They came the way bad news always comes, a little at a time, then all at once. A pack to the north, 7 mate bonds dissolved in a single night, wolves waking to find the person beside them a stranger. 2 of them dead by morning, their bodies simply giving up, without the bond, to anchor them. Then another pack. 5 elders who failed to shift under the full moon and died in the trying. Then another. Warriors who could no longer feel their pack bonds, who couldn't find each other through the links that made them more than a crowd of animals. Lucian's war room filled with maps and red pins. Helena read updates aloud in a voice that got quieter with each one. And through it all, Nell sat with the texts, pushing herself harder, translating slower than they needed, and faster than was safe blood on her fingertips, and a splitting ache behind her eyes. Because the first text had finally opened for her. She'd found her anchor, the need to protect, to matter, to use this thing in her blood, for something that counted, and the symbols had lit up gold under the black ink, and her hand had moved on its own. In the time before memory, she'd written a covenant, was made between our kind and the earth itself. We were given the gift of the change, the blessing of the bond. In return, we swore to be guardians, keepers of the balance. And when guardians forget what they guard, when enough wolves reject sacred bonds for power, when enough have forgotten what they are, the reckoning comes. The reckoning cannot be stopped. It can only be survived by those who are true. She'd collapsed at the end of it, blood dripping from her nose, and woken hours later in the healing ward with Lucian keeping a vigil beside her bed and an expression on his face she was afraid to name. "You did it," he said when her eyes opened. "You read what no one has read in 200 years, and you nearly killed yourself doing it." "There's more," she rasped. 16 more texts. And Lucian, she found his hand, gripped it. "One of them will tell us how to survive it. I felt it. I felt the shape of it. We just have to reach it in time." He looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something she'd never seen him do. He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her bloodied knuckles and closed his eyes. "Then we'll reach it," he said, "together, at a pace that keeps you alive. Do you hear me? Eleanor, I have buried one scribe. I will not bury another. Whatever is coming, we face it with you breathing." And later that night, alone in her rooms, with the eastern gardens dark beyond the glass, a message came through the court's network. From Grey Hollow, from Wren. 3 short lines that made Nell's blood run cold. "Bond's breaking here too. 2 dead already. And Nell Elder Marin says to tell you the Thorns are hiding something about the reckoning. Something old. She says come home. She says you're the only one who can read it before it's too late." Nell stood at the window a long time, the message glowing in her hand, and understood that her past was not finished with her. That the pack that had thrown her away was going to need her to walk back through its gates. And that whatever the Thorns had buried the lie under Luna Thorn, the reason Garrett had been told to break her, the thing worth killing a moon scribe's mother to keep hidden, it was tangled up in the reckoning itself. She was going to have to go home. And she was not going home as the girl who'd knelt in the mud. Nell Hartwell walked back through the gates of Grey Hollow 6 weeks after she'd left them. She did not come the way she'd gone. She came in royal court colors, deep blue robes stitched with silver, the mark of an official envoy of the Alpha King. 4 of Lucian's personal guard walked at her back. Margot walked at her side there to steady the failing wolves the reckoning had already begun to break. And where once Nell had timed the hallways so she'd never be seen, now the whole pack stopped to stare as she passed. Because she was not the ghost who catalogued the dead anymore. The gates opened, and Wren came running. She threw herself at Nell hard enough to stagger her arms, locked tears already falling. "You came," she breathed into Nell's hair. "I heard you might. I didn't believe it. Couldn't let you face this alone." Wren pulled back, held her at arm's length, and just looked. At the robes, at the stillness, at whatever had settled into Nell's face in the weeks away. "You're different," she said. "No." Nell smiled, and it was a tired thing, but real. "I'm the same. I just stopped hiding it." Then Wren's face fell. "It's bad, Nell. 3 dead now. Bonds snapping like threads. Half the pack is terrified. And Garrett," she hesitated. "He's been trying to reach you. He's not the same either. But that's not why I told Marin to send for you." "Then why?" "Because the dying isn't random." Wren's voice dropped. "It's not hitting everyone. It's choosing. And Marin thinks she knows why. But she says only you can read the proof." Nell felt it then cold down her spine. The lie she'd tasted at the reception. The thing the thorns had buried. It was here. It had always been here. And she'd come home to dig it up. Alpha Reeve received her in his study, and he had aged a decade in 6 weeks. His hair had gone fully gray. His face was carved with sleepless nights. And when Nell walked in, wearing the king's colors, the old wolf who'd once presided over her humiliation without lifting a finger, that wolf stood up and bowed his head. "Eleanor, thank you for coming. I know I don't deserve, you don't." She said it without heat, just truth. "But your pack does. The ones who were kind when the rest of you were cruel. I'm here for them." He flinched. He nodded. He deserved the flinch. "Whatever you need," he said. "Complete access. Every record of every mating and rejection in this pack for the last 50 years. Every wolf one at a time to be assessed. And honesty, Alpha Reeve." Her eyes held his. "No more politics. I'll know if you lie. I think you understand that now." He understood. So she sat up in the library, her library, the one she'd loved and hidden in, and thought she'd die in, and she began the hardest work of her life. Because she read them, one by one. She read the truth in every wolf who came through that door. And some, she could save the ones whose bonds were real, whose fear was the only thing fraying them, whom she could send home with old rituals and honest words to knit themselves back together. Those she saved with joy. But others she couldn't, because some wolves had rejected true mates for gain and felt no true remorse, only fear of the cost. And she had to look them in the eye and tell them the reckoning was coming for them, and that no last-minute plea born of terror would turn it. That was the cruelest part of the gift, knowing, and having to say it aloud. She'd been at it for hours when the door opened and Garrett Cole walked in. He looked terrible, gaunt, hollow-eyed, the confidence stripped clean off him so that what stood in the doorway was just a man, and a frightened one. "Nell," he said, "sit." She didn't look up from her notes. "You get what everyone gets. No more, no less." He sat. His hands shook. "I need you to know I'm sorry," he said. "I was wrong. About everything. I know you're sorry." She lifted her eyes, and she let her gift open, and she read him the way she read them all. "I can feel it. It's real, Garrett. The regret's real." A pause. "It's also shallow. Underneath it, there's mostly fear. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry it's going to cost you your wolf." He went white. "That's not Nell seeing you at the ceremony, seeing what you became. It changed something. It scared you. Gentle. Final. That's not the same as changing." "Then tell me how." Desperate now, leaning forward. "Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. Anything. I'll spend my whole life making it right. You'll what? Win me back." Silence. And there it was, in his eyes before he could hide it. Yes. Even now. Even mated to another woman. Some part of him thought that if he groveled long enough, the plain library wolf he'd thrown away would come running back the moment she stopped being plain. Nell felt something in her chest go very quiet and very clear. "That's the problem," she said. "You still think this is about me forgiving you. It isn't. I'm not the door back into your good graces, Garrett. And you don't get to reject me, humiliate me, invite me to watch you. Mate someone else and then decide I was worth something the moment a king looked at me twice." She stood. "That's not how worth works. It was never about how I looked. It was about whether you were the kind of wolf who could see it. And you weren't." "Nell, please. Here's what I'll tell you, because I don't wish this on anyone." She came around the desk. "You want to survive the reckoning. Then stop trying to win me. Stop performing regret for an audience. Go find out what you're actually for. Not as my mate that's dead and gone. As a wolf. As someone who protects something. Figure that out, and mean it down to the bone, and maybe you'll make it." She met his eyes one last time. "But I can't find it for you. Nobody can. Goodbye, Garrett." He left with his shoulders bowed, carrying the weight of a life he'd built on the wrong things, and Nell sat back down, and breathed, and waited for the pain of it. It didn't come. Just closure. Cool and clean, like the first breath after a fever breaks. Elder Marin found her at dusk when the last wolf had gone. The old woman shuffled in and lowered herself into a chair, uninvited as always, and set a slim book on the desk between them. Older than the 17 texts. Older maybe than the pack itself. "You felt it at the reception," Marin said. "The Lunar's lie. Now you're strong enough to read what she's been guarding." She pushed the book across. "Your mother found this. It's what got her killed." Nell went still. "Killed. You didn't think the fever was natural?" "Not a question. She got too close, child. To this. She was going to bring it to Alpha Reeve, and then she got sick all at once, a healthy woman gone. In a month." Marin's cloudy eyes were terrible in the low light. "I have kept this hidden 14 years. Waiting for a scribe strong enough to read it. Waiting for you." Nell's hands shook as she opened the book, and found her anchor, and let the gold rise up through the black, and read. And the world she thought she understood turned inside out, because the reckoning wasn't only a judgment. That was the surface truth, the thing meant to be found. Neath it was the real one. The last reckoning, 200 years past, had been steered. A single bloodline had seen the dying begin and understood what it was, and instead of warning the packs, they'd used it. They'd whispered which wolves to reject, which bonds to break, which families to let fall. And when the reckoning took the ones they'd marked, that bloodline had risen up out of the wreckage and seized power across 3 territories while everyone else was too busy burning to notice. You could not stop the reckoning, but you could point it. And the bloodline that had done it before was doing it again. The Thorns. Nell looked up from the page, and her voice came out barely above a whisper. They're not surviving the reckoning. They're farming it. And a moonscribe can read the pattern, Marin finished, can see which deaths were chosen and which were chance, can stand before the Council of Alphas and prove it. The old woman's mouth curved grim and satisfied. You are the one thing on this earth the Thorns cannot allow to exist. That child is why he was told to break you, before your gift could wake. The door opened. Vanessa Thorne stood in it. She wasn't in white now. She was in dark riding leathers, and there was nothing radiant about her, nothing bridal, just a cold, hard beauty and a small silver blade in her hand, and behind her 2 wolves Nell didn't recognize, who did not smell of gray hollow at all. You always did spend too much time in this library, Vanessa said. My mother said we should have burned it with your mother still inside. Nell rose slowly. Behind her she felt Margot go tense in the doorway to the back room. Felt Marin frail and unarmed at her side. You killed her. Nell's voice didn't shake. She noticed that distantly, the way she always noticed it now. You had my mother killed, and then you had Garrett throw me away in front of everyone so I'd be too broken to ever wake up. I had you handled. Vanessa stepped into the room, blade catching the last light. You were nothing. A dusty little Omega who'd have died sad and small in this exact room, and no one would have missed you. Her lovely face twisted. And then he came. He came for you. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? You did that. Nell felt the old fury rising, but it was different now. Cold instead of hot. A blade instead of a wildfire. You told Garrett to reject me. You planned the humiliation. You've been steering the reckoning through this territory like a scythe, choosing who lives and who dies, and you were going to walk out of the ash wearing a crown. She let her gift flare, and the candles down the length of the library flickered as one. And I can prove every word of it. Vanessa's eyes went wide, and then hard. Not if the only scribe who can read it is dead. She lunged, and here is where the old Nell would have frozen, would have flinched and stumbled and let it happen. But she wasn't the old Nell anymore. She threw up her hands, and the power came. Not a candle flame now, but a wall of it, a shield of raw scribe light that caught Vanessa mid-lunge and threw her back into the shelves. Margot was already moving, taking one of the strange wolves down in a blur of copper. The guards came through the door behind them. And Ren, who must have felt the surge of power from clear across the pack house, came through the window in a shower of glass, with her rust-red wolf half-shifted and her teeth bared. It was over in under a minute. But Nell could have ended it faster, could have burned Vanessa to a shadow on the floor. The power was there, roaring in her blood, begging to be used, and it would have been so easy, and no one in that room would have blamed her. She didn't, because that wasn't the win. She stood over Vanessa Thorne, pinned and snarling on the library floor, and she let the fire in her hands go quietly out. No, Nell said. Not like that. You don't get a quiet death in a locked room. You've spent 200 years killing in the dark. She looked up at Ren, at Margot, at the guards. Bring her to the council. Bring her mother. Bring every alpha in the territory. And bring the book. Because the sword the Thorns had feared was never a claw or a flame. It was the truth, spoken out loud, where everyone could hear it. The council convened 3 days later in the great hall of the royal court. 30 packs, 30 alphas with their lunas and their betas and their sharpest advisors, filling the tiered seats in a wall of skepticism and fear. Because word of the reckoning had reached every corner of the territory now. The dying had made believers out of the doubters. Nell stood on the platform beside Lucian in blue and silver, and she was terrified, and she did not let it show, and she had learned the difference between those two things. Luna Thorne rose from the accused's bench, ice-eyed, even in chains, and tried the only weapon she had left. "This is a child," she said to the assembled Alpha's voice, smooth as still water. "A rejected Omega with a grudge and a convenient gift no one can verify. She'll say anything the king puts in her mouth. Are you truly going to condemn a bloodline on the word of a girl who—" "Ask me something," Nell said. The hall went quiet. "You say my gift can't be verified, so verify it." She looked out over the sea of powerful wolves, and she found the ones with the guarded faces, the ones with the load-bearing lies, because she could see them now, glowing faint and sick under everything they showed the world. "Any of you, ask me something only you could know, and I'll speak it back to you in front of everyone. That's what a moon scribe is. That's the thing the Thorns killed my mother to keep buried." Silence. And then an old alpha near the back stood gray-muzzled, hard-faced, a wolf who'd clearly come to scoff. 20 years ago," he said, "I did a thing no living soul knows. Name it." Nell let her gift unfold toward him, felt the shape of it, the grief, the shame, the love buried under both. "You rejected your true mate," she said quietly, "because she was human. You married a wolf of good blood instead to please your pack. You have 3 children you love, and you dream about her every night. And you've spent 20 years afraid the moon would make you pay for the cowardice." She held his eyes gently. "You don't have to be afraid of that. The reckoning judges the false. And a wolf who's carried honest grief for 20 years isn't false. You're just sorry. That's a different thing." The old alpha sat down very slowly. His hands were shaking, and when he lifted his face, there were tears on it, and something no one had seen on him in years. Relief. The hall had gone from skeptical to silent to something else entirely. They believed. And then Nell opened her mother's book on the podium before them, and she read. She read the pattern of the last reckoning 200 years gone, the marked families, the whispered rejections, the deaths that only looked like chance. And then she read the pattern of this one, the fresh one, the dying happening right now in their own packs, and laid it beside the old one, and showed 30 alphas that the shape was the same. Exact. A scythe swung by the same hand. She named the wolves the Thorns had marked. She named the deaths they'd chosen. She traced the thread from a poisoned scholar 14 years ago, straight to the woman in chains, and she did it in her own voice in the light, where everyone could hear. By the time she finished, Luna Thorne wasn't smooth anymore, and Vanessa wasn't cold. They were just 2 wolves stripped bare in front of the whole world, and the world was looking at them at last, and there was nowhere left to hide. The reckoning, Nell told the council, could not be stopped, but it could no longer be steered, because the pattern was known now, named, held up to the light, and a reckoning that everyone could see was just a hard season to be survived together, not a weapon in the hands of a few. "Go home," she told them. "Honor your bonds. Protect the ones you can. Remember what we're for. Not because I'm threatening you, Because it's true, and you know it, and you've always known it. She closed the book. That's all a moon scribe ever does. We just say the thing out loud. The thorns fell that day, not to fire, to the truth, and that Nell understood was a far heavier thing to fall to. It was late when Lucian found her on the high terrace, wrapped against the mountain cold, looking out over 3 territories worth of dark and distant lights. "You could have burned her," he said, coming to stand beside her. "On the library floor. I saw the reports. You had the power. No one would have questioned it." "I know. Why didn't you?" Nell was quiet a moment, watching the lights. "Because that's what they do," she said finally. "The thorns. Power in the dark. Deciding who lives and who dies, where no one can see." She pulled the cloak tighter. "I didn't want to win the way they win. I wanted to win the way my mother would have. In the light. Where it counts." A small breath. "She died for that book, Lucian. The least I could do was read it out loud." He looked at her for a long moment, and there was something in his silver eyes she'd been afraid to name for weeks. "There's something you should know," he said. "Something I only confirmed when the last text opened for you." He turned to face her fully. "You and I. We were never mates. The moon didn't make us for each other. I want you to hear that plainly, because I need you to understand what I'm about to say." Nell's heart went still. "I know," she said quietly. "I've known. There's no bond. There's never been a bond. And do you understand why?" He stepped closer. The moon scribe line was hidden from fate itself, made without mates, on purpose, so that a scribe could never be controlled through a bond, never be broken the way Garrett tried to break you, so that a scribe would only ever be loved. His voice roughened, by choice, freely or not at all. The words went through her like the first warm light of a morning she'd waited her whole life to see. Because she understood now. All of it. The thing her mother had written in the journal, the thing she hadn't let herself believe. What was meant to destroy you may be the very key to your power. Garrett's rejection hadn't cost her a destined mate. There had never been one to lose. The rejection had freed her, to wake, to become, and now to choose. "So this is the part," Nell said, and her voice wasn't quite steady, "where you tell me you love me, and I get to decide whether I believe you. Without the moon deciding for me. Yes." Simple. Honest. His eyes never left her face. "I'm not your fate, Eleanor. I'm just a wolf who watched a rejected Omega walk into her own execution in a blue dress and forgot how to want anything else. I chose you in that archive before I knew you'd change the world, and I've chosen you every single day since. Not because destiny demands it, because you're extraordinary, and I'd be a fool not to." A pause. "But it means nothing unless you choose it too. Freely. With your eyes open. So do you. And here is the thing about a woman who has been thrown away. She knows exactly what it costs to be chosen, and mean it." Nell looked at this dangerous, guarded, grieving king who'd stood at her back when the whole world had turned from her, who'd given her rooms with the morning light, and never once tried to make her small. And she read him the way she read everything now, straight down to the truth. And there was no lie in him. None at all. "I choose you," she said. "Not because you're powerful. Not because you saved me. You didn't. I saved myself, and we both know it. I choose you because you saw me. Really saw me. When I was nothing anyone here thought worth looking at. She reached up and laid her hand against his jaw. "We'll never have a bond. And I think that makes it better. Because no one gave this to us. We made it ourselves." He kissed her then on the high cold terrace under the enormous moon, and it was nothing like the bond had felt, that lightning, that helpless pull, that being chosen against your will. It was quieter, and it was hers, and she picked it herself out of all the things in the world, with her eyes wide open. Which she was starting to understand was the only kind of love worth having. 1 year later, Eleanor Hartwell stood in a room full of light. They'd rebuilt an old temple on the mountainside, gray stone and glass, perched, where you could see 3 territories fall away below you into blue distance. And inside it, in a circle on the floor, sat 12 young wolves with their heads bent over, pages of the old tongue, learning to read the truth. Learning to be keepers of the balance. The first class of moon scribes in 200 years. She'd found them one by one, scattered across the pack's dormant blood sleeping gifts, children and elders alike, who'd never known what they carried. And she'd brought them here, and she was teaching them the thing her mother had died to protect. "Remember," she told them, and her voice carried in the bright stone room. "Your gift isn't about power. It isn't even about reading old books. It's about serving the truth, about helping our people remember what they are, so that what happened before never has to happen again." She looked around the circle at their serious young faces. "And it's about choice. The greatest thing you can ever do for another wolf isn't to fix them. It's to show them they were never as small as they were told." A girl in the front raised her hand. 17, brown-haired, easy to overlook, and Nell's heart turned over, because she knew that girl, had been that girl. "Is it true," the girl asked, "that you were rejected? That's what woke your gift. It's true. Do you regret it? Wish it had gone different?" Nell thought about it. About Garrett, who'd left the pack 6 months ago genuinely. This time no groveling, just a quiet letter saying he'd found work in a distant territory, teaching young wolves about the sacredness of bonds, trying to become the thing he should have been. She hoped he made it. She didn't need him to. Those were different things, and she'd finally learned the difference. She thought about Gray Hollow, rebuilding under Wren, who'd risen to lead it, and led it well. About her mother's name spoken with honor now in the pack that had once let her die. She thought about the cold terrace and the enormous moon, and a choice she'd made with her eyes wide open. "No," she said, "I don't regret it, because that rejection cracked me open. It freed me to become this, to find my mother's work, and my own power, and my own life. To choose it all, instead of being handed it." She smiled at the girl who was her own younger self. Sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you turns out to be the thing that set you free. You just can't see it while you're still standing in the wreckage of it. Behind her the temple door opened and Lucian stepped in, done with his counsel, come to find her the way he always did at the end of the day. "There you are," he said. "Here I am." He crossed to the window and stood beside her, and together they watched the sun go down, gold and red, over 3 territories that were slowly remembering what they were. She had come to this world as a thing to be thrown away. A plain library wolf rejected in the mud, invited to a wedding to be broken one final time. She was leaving it every single day into every single tomorrow as herself. Powerful, chosen, and absolutely finally certain of her own worth. Because the beta had invited his rejected mate to his wedding to mock her, and she had walked in on the arm of a king. But that had never been the real victory. The real victory was this. That she had walked out in the end as no one's but her own. That she'd learned the truth her mother tried to leave her, and lived it all the way down to the bone. That being thrown away had been the greatest gift she was ever given, because it set her free to become exactly who she was always meant to be.